Welcome to week 3 of the study of Mark. If you've been with us for 2 weeks, thank you for journeying with us, and I'm hoping that you're beginning to kind of understand the flow of Mark and that God's been speaking to you through your study and devotion times. If you're new and week 3 is your first week, welcome. We have written this to be modular, so pick right up and join us as we march forward through the next few weeks together. This week we're going to see that Jesus chooses the team of people, the individuals that He will walk with and mentor, and who He has chosen to build His church through. What we're going to find is that He chose some interesting individuals, some that maybe we wouldn't have naturally chosen. Have you ever tried out for a athletic team? Well, if you have, you realize the tryout process is nerve-wracking. You make a shot, or you miss a shot, and you end up overanalyzing it somehow. There's no way I'll get on the team, or oh yeah, I'm on the team now, and you completely overanalyze it. And what sometimes you miss because of how your anxiety, or at least my anxiety was, is I missed it that really the coaches were looking for a group of people who would work well together. The coach was looking for individuals who were coachable and teachable, and who would be willing to work very hard. And Jesus has a very similar perspective when He goes about choosing the disciples. He didn't necessarily choose the ones that were naturally the leaders, or the ones that we would identify right off. He chose a group of people with some different reasoning. He chose people like Peter and Andrew and James and John, two sets of brothers who were working in family businesses fishing on the Sea of Galilee. These 4 individuals knew what it meant to take risk, physically as well as economically. These 4 individuals understood what it meant to go out for a whole night to fish and get nothing, and yet go right back the next day and the next day and the next day. He chose these 4. They understood what the real world was about and how to persevere through times that were difficult and trials, and they also knew that good days came. He picked people like Philip and Bartholomew and James and Thaddeus and Simon, people who were willing to do the work and didn't need the recognition or the notoriety because we know very little about them. He picked people like Matthew, and I love Matthew's story. For Matthew was a tax collector, which means he was a Jewish person working for the Roman government, collecting taxes from the Jews. Most of the tax collectors were hated because they were cheaters. They were traitors in the eyes of the Jewish people. And yet it was Jesus who walked up and saw something very different in him and said, "Matthew, follow me." And you know what Matthew did? He left it all behind. Completely changed his life in an instant. What an amazing conversion experience. And Matthew stands for all eternity as the example that God is willing to forgive and to use us. That there is nothing in our past that prevents us from being used by God. Those were the kind of individuals that Jesus was looking for. Those that understood what it meant to not only to be diligent and work hard, but understood that life at times was pretty difficult. He chose people like Thomas, who we know probably best for doubting after the resurrection. But Thomas had this loyalty streak. He once told Jesus, "If you're going to go to Jerusalem, if that's the deal, then I want to go with you even if it means death." He was that sort of loyal person. That's who Jesus was looking for. He didn't need scholars and theologians. He was going to do that himself. Jesus wanted people, well, who were willing to roll up their sleeves, to be open and willing and teachable. Jesus also chose this man, Judas Iscariot, who in the 19th verse of the 3rd chapter of Mark is already identified as the one who will betray Jesus. Judas shows us that Jesus is unwilling to give up on us. Even if deep within us there is this bent towards betrayal, which if we'll be honest is probably within all of us. No, I'm sure is within all of us. Jesus, through Judas, shows us He's not going to give up on us. He's going to continue to pour into us, continue to give us chances. And Jesus' hope and will and prayer is that our faith will grow. What I want you to see is that it may have begun with these 12, but there was also many people that were included as a part of the discipleship group. These 12 were designated as apostles, and we know that all but one persevered to the end. But Jesus had other disciples, other followers. He chose women to become part of the discipleship group at a time where women were not included in those sorts of things. He chose Gentiles who were outside of the faith of the day, people who did not have the right upbringing or the right, to be honest, they weren't from the right side of the tracks. And Jesus chose them and walked with them and mentored and poured into them. What I hope we'll see is that we'll identify with one or two or half a dozen of these disciples. For they all have something unique that they bring. But they all have something very similar that they shared. They were willing and they were open and they were teachable. And what happened is, as because of that, Jesus poured into them. And then on the day of the Pentecost Day, the Holy Spirit poured into them, and then they were sent forth. And they changed the face of the earth by being vessels that were open and willing to be poured out in other places. May that be so with us this week. May we find ourselves through the study, a third chapter of Mark, being filled. And then may we allow Jesus to pour us out, wherever it is He's called us this week. I'd covet your prayers as Lisa Michelle, Dick Dedick, and I are in Covington at the Kentucky Annual Conference. It's a convention of United Methodists across the state of Kentucky. We gather together for 3 days to do the business of the conference and really have a time to catch up with some of our friends in different places. Always a good time, and we covet your prayers as we do that this week. Hope to see you a couple of times. We hope to see you on Thursday night. Our Thursday evening meal starts at 6. Bring a side dish or a dessert. Always appreciate it. And we'll share a time of a meal together. Also, Sunday, remember, we meet at 9:30 for fellowship time, donuts and coffee and juice. 10 o'clock is our joint worship service. It has been a great beginning of the summer. And there's real excitement about not only the study, but a lot of things are happening within the study. Remember to stay on target this week through acts of kindness, and let us know where you are, what you've done, and where you're going by taking a picture and either sending it to Lisa Michelle or myself, and we will make sure that gets uploaded to Facebook as we celebrate all the places that we are going and all of the acts of kindness that are taking place because of your faithfulness. Hope to see you Thursday and Sunday, if not before. And my prayer is that God would use you powerfully this week.